Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Do we have any apologies other than Councillor Allen? Councillor Stanton. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of interest, and I'm going to hand over to Janie on this one. Sorry? Is that better? Marvellous. So I'm going to hand over to Janie for the declarations of interest.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pursuant to the Members' Code of Conduct, dispensations have been granted for all members to allow full participation and voting in item 10 this evening.
Thank you. The item 3, to approve the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 30th of January.
Move, Madam Mayor.
Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Item 4, to receive announcements from the Mayor. I've got a couple. The first one is to remind members that it's International Women's Day on Saturday here. There will be various celebrations, one of which Rock Choir have dared me to sing. And as you know, I don't do that very well. But they have dared me to sing, and that will be one of the events. Stop nodding. That will be one of the events on Saturday. So, again, please come along. Please sponsor me, because it is for Comic Relief. The next event, just to let you know, there are still places for the Clough and Taylor 10K at Donington Park on Sunday. I'll be there, but I won't be running. And I'll remind you again about the firewalk, because we won't be having another meeting before it. The firewalk will be part of the St George's Day celebrations on the 20th of April in the marketplace. And the firewalk with 100 people will be the finale. Okay, that's it for the announcements from the Mayor. So I shall hand over to Adam and Mark to tell you their jokes.
Why did the toilet roll down the hill? To get to the bottom. Once there was 2 muffins in an oven. One said, "Oh, it's hot in here." The other one says, "Wow, a talking muffin."
Thank you very much for your support there. Item 5, to receive any statements from members of the Council Cabinet. We have none. Item 6, to receive any questions from the public to members of the Council Cabinet. There are none. Item 7, questions about Derbyshire Fire Authority and Derby Homes. There are none. To receive any written questions from non-Council Cabinet members to members of the Council Cabinet, we have one, and it's Councillor Atwell to Councillor Banwaite. Councillor Banwaite. Sorry about that. Councillor Banwaite has replied in writing, so Councillor Atwell, do you have a supplementary? Sorry, I just couldn't see it. Everybody's moved, haven't they? Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Cabinet member doesn't understand my original question. I asked about consultation prior to the budget proposals being released for public consultation. The question obviously hasn't been answered. I'll take your non-answer as an admission that no prior consultation happened. Your answer is about capital funding. My question was clearly about revenue funding, Councillor Banwaite.
Before you answer, Councillor Banwaite, Councillor Atwell, can I trouble you to say that again? Because quite a few people were saying they couldn't hear you. So if you speak louder, please.
I'll try again. Madam Mayor, the Cabinet Member doesn't understand my original question. I asked about consultation prior to the budget proposals being released for public consultation. I'll take your non-answer as an admission that no prior consultation happened. Your answer is about capital funding. My question was clearly about revenue funding. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to answer the supplementary? Councillor Balmate?
Well, I'm stunned by that because we have answered the question. You know, the fact of the matter is, budget consultation means consultation. We've just set a budget at the last full council meeting, and as part of that process, we had a budget consultation. I don't know whether you were on holiday, or, you know, or you... I mean, I'm just stunned that you've obviously clearly missed that whole consultation. And what proves the point you missed that consultation is you never asked the question at the most important meeting where you needed to ask that question, which was the full council meeting, which was the pinnacle of that whole process. From what I recall, no question was asked by you or your group, no amendment was put up, no motion was put up. So I'm really confused about why, you know, the context that you're asking that question. The reality is, because of cuts that you support, cuts by your bosses in this coalition government, that's absolutely decimated, an attempt to decimate public services in the city, we have to find ways of modernising CCTV in our city, and we have found that way. The fact is we're investing in CCTV by getting rid of the old, outdated equipment and modernising it and giving a lifespan over the next 10 years. Surely that makes sound business sense. And it's actually saving the taxpayers' money. So, you know, I don't accept your assertion. I think it's absolutely short of incompetence to ask that question at this full council about the consultation event which has already taken place. So I'm absolutely staggered by that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Item 9 is to consider minutes and recommendations of the Council Cabinet dated 20th of February. Do you want me to read it out? Yeah. Okay, so item 1 is to recommend to Council that the Cabinet Member for Planning, Environment and Public Protection be appointed to the D2N2 Local Transport Board. Is somebody moving it? Or? Yeah?
Leave as printed.
All those in favour? Any against? It's carried. Item 2, to recommend to Council that the Leader of the Council be nominally appointed as the Council's second representative on the D2N2 Local Transport Board, with authorisation to appoint an alternative member to attend as required. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Thank you very much. We move on to the next item, which is council tax. Yeah. So I believe the Leader wants to speak.
Yeah, very briefly on 15312, Madam Mayor. We're voting tonight to protect vital services from the Coalition Acts. We are protecting vital services from certain cuts, and we're not taking the equivalent of a payday loan. As a council, we will still be one of the lowest, if not the lowest, council tax authorities in the East Midlands, and as always, towards the bottom of any league table on this one. Over 40% of councils have done the same. The money that government has offered as a bribe was time limited and not built into these base budgets. This consequently presents it with a fiscal cliff edge, several of which are going to loom large over the next few years as a result of previous decisions to freeze council tax. Tonight we have to reflect that the government cuts have forced us to make some very, very tough decisions. One of these tough decisions is to decide now that we won't store up problems for the future and make the right decision in relation to council tax. Unless we adjust council tax now, we're storing up a problem for later, future years, and that's worrying. The decision here is prudent, measured and the right for Derby, and I urge Council to support it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the proposals before us this evening, this Labour administration has chosen to propose a raise in council tax of 1.55%. This is a Labour administration's choice to tax the people of Derby. It's not what the Liberal Democrats would have done. The Labour administration had a choice as to whether or not to accept the freeze grant from central government, keeping our council tax at 0%. They've already told you, and you've just heard from the leader, that it's like a payday loan, so they won't take it. They said it needs repayment with interest. Well, that's the implication. It's not a loan which needs repayment. There is no interest to repay. It's a grant for 2 years. It's there to help councils keep the tax at 0% and to help the hard-off residents of Derby at this time. This Labour-led council could have chosen to help you, the people out there, by not increasing the council tax. Indeed, some people and some councils up and down this land have cut council tax bills using this grant. Last year, Liberal Democrats in Derby predicted that the council tax would raise under Labour control. It is, after all, Labour philosophy to tax and spend. This proposal before us this evening supports that philosophy. We see a council tax rise. It's probably no coincidence that up and down this land, Labour-controlled councils are putting up council tax as instructed by their London mandarins. We do not need to look far to see councils in this region have done exactly that. Nottingham and Leicester have raised their tax as much as they dare, and Labour Derby is following suit. Then they are told to bleat it's all that horrid national government's fault. You've heard it tonight. You've been hearing it for weeks. Do they think we've all forgotten why national government has had to cut back? The austerity we face is because of the 12 years of Labour government mismanaging our economy, leaving our country in debt. They had borrowed more than we could afford. We all know that debts eventually need repaying. The credit runs out. Labour bosses know that in London, and even their own leaders now agree that we are in austere times. We need to make savings so that our economy can recover. Labour in Derby has tried to blame the government for everything. It will not take the grant offered. It has cut more deeply than it probably needed to. Labour in Derby can no more deliver financially than National Labour did when running the country. Labour here would like us to forget their 12 years and the tax cuts that they perhaps did to millionaires. The Labour cut tax to this group every year whilst in office until the last month of office. So in fact, for instance, millionaires' income grew under Labour, not fell, as has often been claimed in this chamber. Just to set the record straight, in this Parliament, millionaires have been taxed an extra £310,000. With this to increase next year, not fall. The coalition has also increased capital gains tax, which is something Labour cut whilst in government. We've seen the state pension rise by its bigger ever increase. By April this year, 24 million will not pay tax on the first £944,000 of earnings, putting £600 back into people's pockets. We've seen youth unemployment the lowest in the UK since Labour left office, with 1 million new apprenticeships created since the last general election. We have more people in the UK working than ever before, created a million new private sector jobs, seen Labour's 12-year deficit in the economy reduced by a quarter, kept interest rates low. And just last week, the voters of Eastleigh showed that they believed in the Liberal Democrats and our ability to deliver. They certainly showed Labour as a spent force and not even collecting the protest vote, and clearly said they do not want in Eastleigh, perhaps anywhere else, to return to tax and spend. Liberal Democrats in Derby would have saved money, just as we are doing in government, and as we did in Derby whilst in administration last year. We would have taken the grant from government and frozen the council tax. I and the Liberal Democrats cannot support this unnecessary increase in our council tax.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The residents of Derby have enjoyed and deserved a freezing council tax over the last 2 financial years under Conservative leadership. I know that that's been welcomed by hard-pressed families across the city because they're looking for the council to live within the means and budget, just as they're having to during these unprecedented financial times. However, Labour are now in charge and they're doing what they do best. Mandate or not, council tax is going up and will continue to go up whilst they're in control. And if we look at the baseline council tax increase, it doesn't tell the full story. As we previously debated in this chamber, it's absolutely clear to this group that Labour would have imposed an upfront 5% council tax if they'd been able to avoid triggering a public referendum. And so that's why we've got a stealth tax via the brown bin charge, which taken together with this rise equates to around 5% increase for residents in this coming year. And that's a massive hike at a time when people can least afford it, Madam Mayor. Labour have talked about having a clear mandate for their administration to implement this and all the policies. And while it's true to say they've got a workable majority to push through whatever they please, neither an increase in council tax nor a brown bin charge were in Labour's manifesto. Therefore, they have got no mandate nor public support to do these two things, and I'm sure they'll realise that as we approach the local elections next year. In contrast, had the Conservatives retained control of the council, just as we pledged at the time in our manifesto, council tax would have been frozen for a third year and we would have accepted the government's grant to enable us to do so. That grant has been rejected by Labour here in Derby. And let's remember that it was Labour in government that declared an end to boom and bust. And Labour are the party who, when trusted with the nation's finances, wrecked the British economy. They sold off our nation's gold reserves, they spent billions of pounds we didn't have to increase in the national debt. They left us with crippling debt interest that was increasing massively every minute of every hour of every day. And that is something.
Sorry, just 1 second, Councillor Holmes. Can we have some order because people in the gallery can't hear the main speaker? Thank you.
They left us with crippling debt interest that was increasing massively every minute.
Councillor Holmes, sorry, just 1 minute. Right, can you hear when only one person is speaking? So can you take a lead from the public, please? Carry on, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And that debt's got to be dealt with by the present government and has to remain a priority. Labour would have you believe that there's no need for austerity and that our financial problems are the fault of the current government. Well, that cuts to services here in Derby are nothing to do with them. Well, that's wrong, because managing and allocating the council's budget is a series of choices made by Labour locally. They're choosing to increase council tax when a government grant was available to freeze it. They're choosing to bring in a bin charge because they wanted an overall 5% increase in council tax, but they didn't want a public referendum on that increase. They wanted to avoid that. And we've seen that they've chosen to unnecessarily increase spending, for example, in neighbourhood assistance, instead of allocating the money for protection of vulnerable children or adults in this city. Local choices made by Labour locally. And that's just a few examples of how Labour are not offering a fair deal for Derby, nor are they capable of doing so. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak before I invite Councillor Russell to sum up? Councillor Banway.
Can I say, Madam Mayor, what two pointless and irrelevant contributions in this council chamber? Speeches written in Liberal Democrat and Conservative Party head office. You know, let's get back to reality. What local government is here for, is built for. It's about delivering public services. And it's your government cuts are actually decimating public services in this city. While in other parts of this country, they're closing children's centres and care homes, and they're just the tip of the iceberg of some of the public services that this city council saved, this Labour administration saved. So it's absolutely disgraceful for a councillor in his own ward was planning to shut down a care home, Merrill House Care Home, and didn't have the audacity to turn up on the opening day of the consultation. So we're not going to take lectures from you, Councillor Holmes, about standing up for vulnerable people. And the Liberal Democrats, were they any different? When they came to close Warwick House, a few weeks before Christmas, when they just finished decorating their Christmas tree, they didn't even have the courage of their convictions to come along to the opening day of that consultation. So we will not be lectured by Councillor Jones and Councillor Holmes. about standing up for public services. You should hold your head up in shame the fact you tried to close down those services. And I'm very proud to say, Madam Mayor, it was this Labour group in opposition might I add, that led a very passionate campaign, that were out day in, day out, in the cold, collecting signatures around the Ram, that were able to collect over 18,000 signatures we collected, which actually was the biggest collection of signatures in the country when we went to hand it in at 10 Downing Street. So, Madam Mayor, the reality is, Madam Mayor, it's the Labour group that has been standing up for public services in opposition, and now that we're in power, we've saved those public services. So we won't be lectured by the coalition here. And the mandate you talk about, Councillor Owen, what mandate did you have to drive through those cuts? It's a ragtag bobtail coalition that you entered in with the Liberal Democrats. This administration, even when you were in so-called power, we had more votes. We'd secured more votes than both the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives put together. And now we're in our rightful place, leading this city during tough times. And the choice for the electorate is very, very simple. Because you said the local elections are coming up. We believe in what we're doing. And the public will then decide and make their decision whether they believe that this city is best steered under your administration and the Liberal Democrats combined, or this Labour Council that has actually put its money where its mouth is, and we have stood up for vulnerable people in this city. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Atwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It just goes to show that Councillor Bannerett doesn't know anything about democracy, but hey, we'll move on. Madam Mayor, astounded, shocked and dismayed, what more can one be expected to say? The Labour group have really pulled out the stops at this time to make sure that the residents of this city suffer and suffer again. Here we have before us a motion asking us to improve an increase in council tax, and the biggest question must be asked is why? Well, the bottom line is that the leader of this Labour group is merely here as a messenger, a puppet on a string, and the support and the puppet master sat in Westminster, or is in the public gallery today, who knows? Now, where's the democracy in that? More to the point, Madam Mayor, had the Labour group accepted the government grant for council tax relief, the level of pain would have been undoubtedly less in the city, and the safeguarding of some services possibly protected. The level of increase being applied by the administration is wholly unnecessary, something which could have been wholly avoided had the Labour group let common sense prevail and accepted the grant. The Labour group are playing with a double-edged sword, raising the level of council tax but running scared to avoid raising it to such an extent that a referendum be called. A total mockery if I ever saw one, nothing shy of playing politics with the purse of city residents. 12 months ago, your group stood here stating how you would do things differently. Well, you're certainly living up to that expectation and illustrating your incompetence to an extraordinary level. It disgusts me along with the other members of this side of the chamber, and I'm sure that the residents of this city remember your actions come 2014's, where your expectations of the electorate will be as disappointing as this despicable motion you bring before us in this chamber today. The message from the Labour hierarchy is clearly give your residents pain, and as much suffering as possible, and point the finger at the government. But you, along with your hierarchy, seem to be forgetting the misery caused by your government, and you continue your saga of pain at the local level. The spend days are way gone as you borrow to spend on policies, but your legacies of pain and suffering continue, and your makers will sure remember this day at the ballot box, and your honeymoon period will be brought to an abrupt stop. Don't worry, I will be personally knocking on doors in my ward to remind them of the holes you put in their pockets. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Councillor Skelton, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, Councillor Banwaite has a very strange recollection of the truth. He doesn't know it. He says the Liberal Democrats proposed closing Warwick House. No, not at all. In fact, when I was Cabinet Member, I made sure it didn't happen. And that is a fact. When I was, but not when you were, Councillor. Get your grammar right. Councillor Bayliss, you don't seem to know the difference between a loan and a grant. What hope is there for the city when the leader of the council doesn't know the difference between a grant and a loan? No, it's you that needs to get your English right.
Madam Mayor.
Ladies, if you don't mind, if you could just stick to the speaker.
Choices. It's the cuts that we have at the moment are Labour choices. We all have to live within a budget envelope, whether it's our own personal finances or the council's finances, and we all have to make choices about where we spend our money. Ranjit, of course, is wasting his money on his empire, and unfortunately the rest of the Labour group have let him do it. He's spending another £320,000 on neighbourhood working, which is completely unnecessary. And he also claims that he's been standing up for the vulnerable. Well, £320,000 would have been a lot better applied to services for homeless people, which he is cutting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cutting things to the carers, to all the voluntary sector, 50% cut to the voluntary sector. That's hardly standing up for vulnerable people. So, yeah, quite frankly, the Labour group are real... No, that's it. Yes, you're real hypocrites. Thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Skelton. If we could... I've not had any more indications... Sorry? Thank you for that, Councillor Titley. So, Councillor Russell, if you wish to sum up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Amazing, absolutely amazing. A nice little party election broadcast there from Councillor Atwell. Nice to see it coming from the heart as well. I'm sure the Abbey Ward residents will be really proud of that. Talking about, Councillor Skelton mentioned that the Labour administration has got a strange recollection of the truth. I think she needs to look more inwardly at her own party. Because if memory serves me right, and I believe it is minuted, Madam Mayor, that Councillor Jones at the last full council meeting told this chamber that council tax did not rise under the Liberal Democrats. Well, in actual fact, in 2009-10, it increased by 3.9%, and in 10-11, it increased by 2.4%. So I ask her, is she going to apologise for misleading this chamber? I very much doubt it. And the Tories. Well, it's the usual response that we expect from the Tories. Let's take a grant, keep our fingers crossed and hope in the coming years we don't have to cut even harder or deeper or increase council tax by even more. But that is what's going to happen. And Councillor Holmes mentioned financial mismanagement of the previous Labour government. I think he needs to take a look at his own government. George Osborne has just lost this country its AAA rating, which was his biggest test he set himself in the coming years on a measure of how well he was controlling this country's finances. Well, he's mucked that one up, hasn't he? Now, Councillor Holmes also mentioned our obligation to go to a referendum and increase council tax by above 2.5%. Now, we need to send a clear message to Eric Pickles, our resident local government Grinch, who is stealing money from local authorities left, right and centre, that he needs to get his message right on this, because he told local authorities at the end of last year that we had a moral obligation to take the council tax freeze, hammered that message home. And then what happens in the new year? He tells councils that they need to rise it above 2% to go to a referendum. Which is it? And not only that, he's an absolute hypocrite. He tells local authorities to have a referendum on whether we increase council tax above 2%. But have the Tory government, the Tory Lib Dem government, should I say, have referendums on the level of cuts to local authorities? No. Have they had a referendum? Thank you very much for that cue. A referendum on the bedroom tax? No, they haven't. Have they had a referendum on whether to give tax breaks to millionaires? No, because I certainly wouldn't have been voting in favour of that. Historically, we have a very low council tax base in this city. Now, currently, if we compare our council tax base to other local authorities, for an example, Nottinghamshire, we are £15 million behind them. That means we have £15 million less to spend on frontline services year on year than they do, a cumulative every year. And despite this, we've still managed, in Derby, this Labour administration has managed to protect children's centres, to protect care homes, libraries and parks. And we've done it in the best interest of the people of this city. Now, we are increasing council tax this year to avoid an even bigger increase next year or even deeper cuts. Because some local authorities, let's not pretend, actually share our view. Tory authorities like Surrey, Peterborough and Chelmsford are also raising their council tax. Is Councillor Holmes going to criticise those authorities? No? No? Don't think so. Now, let's not forget as well, we have got to make huge savings in the next 3 years, £62.2 million. Now, that is undoubtedly going to impact on our frontline services, and this authority is doing what it can to protect it, which is why we launched our Fair Deal for Derby campaign. And it's clear that the Tories and the Liberals don't give a damn about Derby or the people that live in it, because they've withdrawn their support from that campaign, and they are criticising us even now at the 11th hour when we want to do what we can to protect frontline services. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. So the motion is to approve the above minutes and recommendations of the Council Cabinet dated the 20th of February 2013. Thank you. All those in favour? All those against? It's carried. Thank you. So, item 10 is to consider a report of the Strategic Director of Resources concerning members' allowances. And as we stated earlier on, there is an exemption.
Yeah, there's dispensations to all members, but the leader has an amendment to the motion.
Yeah. So, we've already mentioned the dispensation. The leader, I believe, has a form of amendment.
Could I formally move the amendment, Madam Mayor? And can I speak for a few minutes? I presume everybody's got a copy of it. I did circulate it by email. Can I speak? Okay.
Sorry, Councillor Bayliss, just before you do we have a seconder? Councillor Russell, thank you.
Yes, I'm going to move the amendment to keep the status quo, because while I think the lead of the Council is worth the recommendation from the independent panel, taking an increase at this time when so many people are losing jobs doesn't sit well with me. No one else in the Council is receiving a pay rise, so why should I? The role of the leader is a full-time role, challenging with many demands, for which fully deserves the £50,000 allowance. However, I didn't come into politics to make money, and certainly when taking this job was the influence that you do it as a matter of public service. I think that the leader of the Council is worth every penny of the allowance, and I stand by that despite what some of that may have commented in the press. So therefore I would move the amendment, and as it says in the Telegraph, I'll order my party to vote against it. But we'll move the amendment. I'll vote for it this time.
Thank you.
Do you want to speak now, or...?
No, can I just reserve my right to speak, Madam Mayor?
Certainly. Does anybody else wish to speak on the amendment? Okay, we'll go back to Councillor Russell then. Seconder.
Move to the vote, Madam Mayor.
Marvellous. All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? Thank you, it's carried. So now we move to the substantive as amended.
There's no, because the motion is the amendment has been approved, so the motion will now be this as amended.
Yes. So we need to. That's it then.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So on to item 11. It's to consider a report of the Strategic Director of Resources.
Madam Mayor.
Yeah. Sorry, a little bit of confusion there. Yeah. So we now, which seems weird, I know, we now vote on the motion as amended. All those in favour of the motion as amended? All those against? Yeah, so it's carried. Thank you. Item 11, to consider a report of the Strategic Director of Resources relating to the pay policy statement. Do we have a seconder? Do we have anybody who wishes to speak? Are you happy to move to the vote? So the motion is to approve the pay policy statement attached to Appendix 2, to note that if approved, the pay policy statement will be published on the Council's website, and 3, to authorise the monitoring officer to make changes to the Constitution resulting from new regulations and guidance from the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? It's carried. Item 12, to consider a report from the Strategic Director of Resources concerning the schedule of meetings 2013 to 2015. Do we have a move? Seconder? Okay, anybody wish to speak? So, the motion to note the updated schedule of meetings for 2012-13 detailed at Appendix 2, to agree the schedule of meetings for 2013-14 and 2014-15 detailed at Appendices 3 and 4, to resolve not to revisit the schedule of meetings at the annual meeting unless changes arise requiring further approval. All those in favour? Any against? It's carried. Thank you. Item 13, to consider the following notice of motion. And it's Councillor Bayliss to move, Councillor Dinser to second. Do you want to move as printed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. While we as a council welcomed the details that the HS2 route had been announced, and in fact we welcomed also that it's an eastern leg serving Derby and Nottingham, it's hugely disappointing that they tarnished this by a questionable decision to locate the station serving Derby in some place called Towton. We know that high-speed rail developments as this will inevitably lead to significant economic and business benefits for the cities they serve. We are advocating that we maximise the opportunity to ensure these benefits reap the greatest possible reward. The choice of Towton is very disappointing because the City Council, under the previous administration, had undertaken a detailed study of the economic benefits to Derbyshire and the Nottinghamshire area of the three potential station locations. This report was shared with Government, has been available publicly for some time, and it shows that the two counties in the elect will derive greater benefits from the station being in Derby. This is in terms of job and wealth creation, sustainable transport and improved services for businesses travelling to and from London. The figures speak for themselves, Madam Mayor, and I'll just briefly quote some of them. In terms of economic benefit, a station at Derby would deliver £440 million of benefits to the D2N2 LEP and the potential for thousands of jobs. Even in Nottingham, the economic benefit would be in the region of £410 million, although the option is not possible, and this point has been acknowledged by Nottingham as well. Compare that to locating the station in Towton, the benefit figure drops by over £100 million to £330 million, and the number of jobs that would create dramatically falls as well, to just 600. This actually makes no sense. I made it clear at the previous council meeting we will be responding to the consultation and campaigning as a city and as a council on HS2. We believe the government had got the East Midlands station location wrong. In fact, at a meeting that officers attended at one stage last year, they actually showed us a location, so I'm told. It actually had the station location in Derby. So the question is, of course, what's changed? The development of new rail facilities in the UK is, of course, of wider interest to Derby. We still have the largest rail manufacturing clusters in the UK and should be proud of that in our heritage. With a massive range of rail companies who would expect to gain work for such a significant government investment, whether it is the building of the rolling stock or supplying the signalling or support infrastructure. The Council will be working with our rail partners to ensure we generate opportunities and jobs for the City of Derby, both in terms of the station location and the rail infrastructure itself. This motion seeks to set out our position and to work on a joint cross-party basis to support the campaign. That is the reason for the motion, and I and the Labour Group are ready to stand up for Derby, and we'll have to see those across the Council chamber will join us on that basis. I commend the motion to Council.
Sorry, Councillor Dinser.
Madam Mayor, I formally second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Do we have any other people wish to speak? Councillor Carr, Councillor Winter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whilst I agree with the general tenor of this motion, I should point out a few facts. First, the current consultation is not about the route. It's about the compensation scheme. A new consultation will be announced later this year on the route, so we are somewhat premature in campaigning at this point. I also, while I support the moves and would strongly support the moves to campaign for the rail businesses in Derby. As a former railman, you probably expect me to say that anyway. But I do not believe that we should be wasting our energy on campaigning for the station in Derby. I think those decisions are probably well foreclosed out a long time ago. I will support any motions. HS2 I strongly believe in. If you look at what happened with HS1, even where that train did not stop, economic benefits accrued all along the HS1 route. So HS2 is a really, really good idea. But I will not support attempts to get the station put here when I believe that we'll be wasting our efforts for taking it away from where they've already planned the route. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Can I just remind members, rather than us go into the debate about where it's going, we are just looking at a motion which is about setting up a governance board.
Madam Mayor, if you wish to remove the bullet points and just talk about the setting the governance board, I haven't made an amendment, I would happily support that motion.
Thank you. Councillor Winter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm in favour of this council establishing a cross-party HS2 strategy board as outlined in the motion. However, to address the 2 bullet points in question, HS2 is a continuation of HS1, which we know from Birmingham to Manchester in the North West and East Midlands, Sheffield and Leeds in the North East. Well, we already know, but I'm just going to reiterate what we've already read. Can I speak, please, sir? Right. Be quiet, then. There are only 5 proposed stations. Just be quiet.
Madam Mayor.
Can I just remind members that members of the public said, when you're speaking over each other, they can't hear you?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. There are only 5 proposed stations along the 2 routes, 2 in Manchester, i.e. City and Airport, 3 in the north-easterly direction, 1 at Towton for Derby and Nottingham, and 1 at Meadow Hall for Sheffield, and 3 at Leeds. The total cost of the project is £33 billion, and it is not due for completion until 2032, 6 years after the completion of HS1. Obviously, every city in the vicinity of the route cannot be catered for. Already there have been objections from Stoke and Leicester that they have been overlooked. To route the line through either Derby or Nottingham would seem rather unfair to whichever city would miss out. Do you mind not conferring while I'm speaking?
Do I take it then that you don't care whether the public can hear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Therefore, I feel that Towton, which has a huge acreage of unused and railway land, would seem to meet the needs of both Derby and Nottingham, where shuttle transport from both city centres to the Towton station is estimated at 12 minutes. On the second point regarding Derby's rail industry, it should be paramount that Derby's expertise in rail infrastructure business features strongly in this development. Regarding the actual trains and locomotives, of which little has been mentioned so far, it should be emphasised that Bombardier of Derby be given a fair chance, so as not to have another Thameslink fiasco with the manufacturer of the trains going abroad. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Skelton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Listening to the leader, he didn't tell us whether he'd had any discussions with his opposite number, Labour councillor leader, in Nottingham City Council. It will be very interesting to know what the leader of Nottingham City Council feels about. Well, it would be very nice to hear what his views are. I don't know whether any... Have you heard what his views are, councillor? Well, perhaps
Councillor Skelton, do you think it's helpful asking another councillor a question? Because they are going to want to respond, aren't they? To be fair.
Yeah.
Can you stop then and carry on?
Maybe he could
stop asking questions and carry on with your speech, please.
Well, yes, it would be very nice to know what the Labour leader of Nottingham City Council indeed does think. I hardly think that he will be sharing Councillor Bayliss's view.
It's not a point of personal explanation, Councillor Bayliss, because we...
It was a rhetorical question, Madam Mayor.
Right.
Really?
To avoid any confusion and to keep the meeting as short as we possibly can you stop asking any sort of question, please?
OK, Madam Mayor. I'm convinced that Labour City Council in Nottingham will be very angered by the views of Labour councillors in Derby. And I'm sure they would be far happier to see a compromise of Towton being the chosen site. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wood, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the first paragraph everybody in this room would wholeheartedly support. I don't think there's any division there whatsoever. There is a little bit of confusion. People have been talking about HS1 going from Birmingham to London. Well, it actually goes from St Pancras Station to the Channel Tunnel. It was opened in 2007 by Her Majesty the Queen. I've used it quite often. So please don't talk about half of HS2 being HS1. It isn't. If I was Secretary of State for Transport, and I thank the Lord I'm not, sir, I would think, well, this line has got to go somewhere near Nottingham or somewhere near Derby. Put a pin in the middle where there is already an excellent north-south line, where there is room to expand and build a station, where by the time I am 80, and if this train arrives on time, it will be, 2032, Derby will have expanded out that far, surely. Nottingham will have expanded out that far, surely. Isn't it ideal that somewhere halfway between Derby and Nottingham is the best place for a station? But we should not be quibbling about this. We should be welcoming wholeheartedly that this government has had the foresight to grab the opportunity and announce something as big as this, from which Derby can only benefit. Derby, as we all know, has a huge historical and I hope a future in railway development. The jobs we can get out of this are marvellous. To argue for a station in Derby on a route that has never been really looked at would mean digging up most of Alveston Ward, would it not? Putting a huge blight on an area. Now, Councillor Bayliss represents Alveston Ward and is either very clever or very foolish. And we can all make up our mind on that. But I certainly would not want a blight put on my ward. We had 40 years waiting for an inner ring road, and people in the wards that was affected by were thrown to the four winds. All the infrastructure was destroyed. Do you really want that for Alveston Ward, Councillor Bayliss? Because that's what would happen. You can't just use the existing Midland Main Line to put in a station at Derby. What we really ought to be arguing for, if anything, is a damn good link to Towton, which is not very far from the eastern side of Derby anyway. But what we need is a good link, probably to something better than to our railway station, which historically, in the 1830s, Derby Council didn't want the railway to come through Derby. It had it out at a place called Litchurch, and look what has happened since. We've not got the railway station next to the bus station. We've suffered from that all this time. What we really need to be doing is something very positive, accepting that Derby and Nottingham are going to have a station well between them, and we can use it, and support the beginning of this motion and forget these 2 bullet points. Actually, we did ask the Labour group to do that through the usual channels so that we could have a unanimous vote on this. And I hope at this late stage somebody could, from the leadership, move an amendment to delete those 2, and we could all go home happy in the support of HS2.
Thank you. Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
The decision of the government to locate this station in Towton was, quite frankly, ridiculous. For both Derby and Nottingham, to get to this station will involve 25 to 30 minutes travelling time, whether that's down the A52, even if you manage to improve the road links, even if you have some sort of tram or other scheme to take people there. There will be a considerable time delay for people to travel from the population centres in both Derby and Nottingham to actually get on board the train at Towton. The benefit of any high-speed line will be wiped out. Do we really think that people are going to go to all that trouble of travelling, making a car journey, when they can go into either Derby or Nottingham city centres once the electrification of the Midland Main Line has gone ahead? That will provide a pretty high-speed service to London and other cities right from the middle of Derby. So it's an absolutely ridiculous decision from the government, quite pointless, and I am concerned that the station at Towton, should it actually go ahead, will become a white elephant with nobody actually using it. So it's actually really disappointing to hear both the Tories and the Lib Dems making statements in the way they have, even campaigning on behalf of Nottingham from the Lib Dems' point of view, which was quite ridiculous, really. I did think that councillors in this chamber are supposed to be representing Derby rather than Nottingham, but the Lib Dems obviously don't think so. So it is, Madam Mayor, quite ridiculous. It's a shame that the Tory and Lib Dem groups don't have the guts to stand up for Derby and to campaign for the high-speed link in this city. And I do welcome this motion, Madam Mayor, as a means of campaigning for those economic benefits in Derby and also ensuring that the rail industry in Derby benefits. And I hope that the Tory and the Lib Dem groups, even at this late stage, have second thoughts and do actually have the guts to stand up for the people in Derby that they're supposed to be representing.
Thank you. Councillor Repton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm absolutely amazed at the response from the Conservatives and the Liberals to this. You would think that these people to the left of me and to the right of me were councillors for some other part of this country, and yet they're not. They're meant to be councillors for this city. And certainly in terms of the conversations that I, the leader, and every other member of my own group has had with various people throughout the city, through the letters that we've seen in the paper, the public are crying out for us to negotiate with the government to get that station based in Derby. It makes economic sense, it makes social sense. The only people it doesn't make sense to are the Liberals to the right of me and the Conservatives to the left. And they seem to have this blind loyalty to their failing government, who's failed on every single test that has been put before them so far. And I think here tonight, both the Liberals and the Tories are failing the people of this city by not supporting this motion. This motion supports the people of this city. This motion supports industry in this city. This motion supports that inward investment of hundreds of millions of pounds. And for the Liberals and the Tories not to get it, maybe it surprised the public, but it doesn't surprise us. But I am saddened by it. I would still urge them at this late stage to support Derby and support this motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Titley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for giving the opportunity to speak. I would just like to make several points. First of all, I think that's a really good red herring that Councillor Woods fed into the debate about Ulverston. There is sufficient room to believe that if Derby was chosen, as it was one of the prime options in the first instance, there wouldn't be a significant blighting of Ulverston. It would be around the periphery. And the other next point I want to make is that what a wet approval of our indigenous rail industry in this city by the Liberals in particular. Do they not realise the strategic importance of getting this station in Derby? And really, haven't the people who've just, albeit in reality, given the go-ahead for it to go in Towton as it stands at the moment? I hear what Councillor Carr says, but in reality that's where it's going to be placed unless we can do something about it, and we should object. You know, let's be honest about this one. the Nottingham agenda is being played here again by the national government. We need that station in this city. And the other thing is, and this is based on some modelling I believe we've done, if that station ended up in Derby, or indeed in Nottingham, the net revenue in terms of annual income that could be generated for the region, for the country, and in our case for the city, will be significantly greater than siting it in Towton. So on all three counts, this station should be in Derby, and it's a disgrace that the other two parties don't see that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We had an earlier debate about having ambition and for standing up for Derby. Quite clearly, the opposition have, with their contributions, decided that even on this occasion, on this issue, they don't actually want to stand up for Derby. The ambition of trying to get more economic benefits for the city of Derby should be clear and coherent to all, but obviously the opposition don't see it that way. They talk about the impact and the ease of the line going through Towton. Councillor Wood, I don't think it's going to be a straightforward situation. There's been a new line has to be built for Towton, and it doesn't make any sense to have it in the middle of either both Nottingham and Derby. There are only, in the consultation, and the Secretary of State identified only two options. Nottingham was discounted because this rail infrastructure will not allow for a station to be put there. The only two options were Derby City Centre or Towton Station. So there's only argument about those two. Within that, quite clearly, as the leader said, the economic benefits for Derby and the region are much, much greater if the station is in Derby than it is in Towton. It's a clear position. And this Labour group, with or without the support of the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, will be making sure that we push that argument, the evidence, and the feasibility home to the Secretary of State through the consultation process, which will carry on for quite a while. But the earlier we start, in terms of making sure that it is in Derby, the better we will be positioned to do so. I still would invite and implore both the opposition party members to vote with us, because a united from the City Council chamber is a much better and a stronger position for the citizens of Derby and the economic benefits to the city than separate and isolated. That is not going to put us off if you vote against, because we will work with even greater vigour to make sure that we get the evidence right and get the Secretary of State to change his mind, because he's got it wrong on this. He's putting this station in the middle of two cities which could benefit. The only city that can benefit is Derby by having a station here. I really would argue with you that some of the issues in terms of the benefits are very clearly identified in a report that you actually commissioned as a Conservative group. You commissioned the report, which has got strong evidence, which hasn't been listened to by government. It has to be listened to by government, and we will try to make sure we do that. Councillor Winter and Councillor Carr come up with some very strange comments about what they think is the benefits and whether the Labour administration in Nottingham is for or against. We know that they would be in favour of Derby as an option. I would not expect them not to be supporting Nottingham as their region, but the facts have gone against them. Therefore, they will work with us, I'm sure, to make sure we get the maximum benefits. We do know that if Towton is the choice, it will just be a stop where nothing happens. It's in the middle of nowhere. The infrastructure costs and the feasibility of using that as a place to actually go to get to London becomes obsolete, as Councillor Rawson just highlighted earlier on. It can only be beneficial to the economy and to our railway industry in the city of Derby if the station is in Derby city centre. And that's what we've got to be fighting for, and we need to get everybody on board to do that. If we can't do it in the council chamber tonight, I hope we can persuade everybody in the city, including the opposition members here, to join us later on. But I do recommend to them that they should join us today, give a unanimous support, unanimous vote to get a station in Derby to get the maximum benefits of HS2 for this city and this region. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All of those in favour of the motion? Against? Okay, it's carried. Thank you very much. At 7:05, we end the meeting. Thank you very much.